It has been a long time coming, but I am finally very excited to get to the table. A game in a series that I have been really itching to play for quite some time, probably for a year or so. And that is 4 Lost Battles from the Library of Napoleonic Battles. As you can see, Kevin Zucker, the Operational Studies Group. 4 batailles perdues. This is a Napoleonic series published by OSG and designer Kevin Zucker, that is grand tactical in nature and just has beautiful production values, as you can see. This one came out earlier this year. It is a reprint of a much earlier game in this system that was the same. It's a reprint of an old volume of this system, and it is a quadra game, as it says here, of the Dresden campaign. So we're talking about sort of mid to late 1813, and essentially these 4 battles in Germany, sort of around Berlin and after the Battle of Dresden, I believe. And so I'm very excited to play this. I have been keenly looking at this series ever since I saw Ardwolf talk about it on his channel. And here you can see it all set up on the table. I have displayed essentially all the major displays under the plexi. Here we have the map and the setup for the units, and we'll go over all of that. I am learning the system, so I will ask that you bear with me as I play. I'm choosing not to play with the cards in my first game simply because I am going to need to figure this out. I have heard people talk about this system as medium weight and pretty easy to get into, and I just finished reading the rule books. I don't know if I would agree with that. If it's medium weight, it does seem like it's probably on the high end of medium weight. But I guess we're going to find out as we play. Now, I am not playing with the cards, but I am going to play with the hidden units option. That's why you see all these flags, the coalition here, the French here, on top of all the units, because that's part of the system, is the hidden units aspect. There's a scouting system with cavalry vedettes. There's a whole step before combat where you reveal units. And as I am trying to learn the system and play it, I am never going to be able to remember everything that's on the map. And so I feel like that fog of war is going to be very interesting and probably very educational in terms of what to do and what not to do in Napoleonic warfare. Excuse me. We've got the weather table up there. We've got the turn record track. We are doing the Battle of Grossbeeren, which as you can see here. And one of the things that really attracted me to this system were the maps. I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous. Not only the color palette that's being used here, but the graphics and even the texture of the maps just feels so nice. You can see here the Battle of Grossbeeren, to the gates of Berlin, 23rd of August, 1813. It is a Napoleonic battle with no Napoleon, and all of the battles in this particular game are more likely to not feature Napoleon than they are to feature him, because at the point of this campaign was for the coalition allies to kind of hit the French army where he was not. But as you can see, Charlie Kibler with the lovely artwork on the map. I just love the details of the forests and the swamps and the rivers, and you can see the little relief shading, and it just looks very aesthetically pleasing. It's very nice. Yeah, so that was what attracted me to the system. I heard good things. We decided we're going to pick up the new printing of 4 Lost Battles. And the reason I'm starting with 4 Lost Battles is because they are all on smaller maps. So, being able to learn the system on a half-size map is going to be very good for me. And I plan to play a bunch of these depending on how it goes, if I like it. But the other battles in this box are also on smaller maps, and that allows me to have the display sheets. You got the turn track up here. We're doing a 9-turn game. Each turn is an hour. You can see the reinforcements. We've got the weather table. We've got the casualty demoralization table. This is a really interesting kind of way to do this, but basically each of the scenarios, as you can see, is listed here. And then you've got each of the cores for each of the, so it looks like these 2 are going to be coalition, these 2 are going to be French, and all of the cores. And so you're just going to keep track of when they reach demoralized status based on when their little marker reaches this box, which is pretty nice. And then here we've got the Casualties box. And so you can see there's a lot of charts. And so having these charts on the table is going to take up a lot of space. If we were playing with a full map, or even in some of the other games, 2 maps or even 3 maps, you're going to need a large table to play some of these battles. But I'm hoping it's going to be worth it. And yeah, so I'm glad you're joining me on this journey as I discover the Library of Napoleonic Battles. Let's talk about this particular scenario and some of the considerations that I am going to have when it comes to playing the game. All right, Battle of Grossbeeren. Let's talk about what this scenario has in store for us. So first of all, This is a victory point based system, and there's a lot of ways you can get victory points. Specifically and in general, you're going to be able to get victory points from enemy combat strength points eliminated. You're going to basically look at the differential between both sides at the end of the battle. Any enemy formations that you manage to demoralize are going to give you victory points. If you capture enemy baggage trains, which you can see here and here, I'm going to leave those unhidden for now because they're kind of important. You can get victory points through controlling specific hexes. In this particular scenario, we are looking at 2 hexes. We're looking at the town of Grossbeeren, and we're looking at the town of Blankenfeld, which is up here. Both of those particular towns are worth 1 victory point a turn that you control them. And at the end of the game, they're going to be worth 5 victory points if you control them when the battle is over. So the French, in this scenario, are going to be driving in this way. They're going to want to try and take these towns from the coalition. There is a French reinforcement pool that is going to be the sort of 3rd corps in this scenario that's going to come in this way a little bit later. We'll see if they're going to make a difference. Obviously, they can potentially come up this way, maybe threaten these rear lines so that the coalition can't get too far forward. In general, coalition very badly positioned here. We've only got a couple of units in Grossbeeren, and the French army is on the march. The other way you can get victory points in this system is through cards, which again, we're not playing with. In the night, there is going to be a couple of night turns, or it looks like 1 night turn at the end of the scenario. If you manage to have a commander, is it a commander? No, leaders, any leaders, in a town or a chateau hex through the night, you're going to get victory points for that. And if you capture any of the opponent's commanders, in this scenario there are no commanders, you can also exit units off the map, potentially scoring victory points for that as well. So that's kind of the general gist of it. If we look a little bit closer at some of these objectives, you can see that the terrain around Grossbeeren is pretty rough. There's it looks like a river here and some of these forests. There's also this high ridge, which is probably going to be important to try and take for artillery purposes. And then up here, again, we've got the town is like butted up with some forest here, so it's going to be a little bit tougher. Now, the coalition corps that is stationed up here at Blankenfeld, they're out of supply, which means they're suffering the effects of demoralization. I'm not quite sure what the implication of that's going to be just yet, but I can tell you what the actual rules say about being demoralized, and that is that 1 is subtracted from their initiative rating, which means that they are going to be harder to activate. Cavalry units are not going to be able to charge. If they're defending in a chateau, they don't get any defensive bonus. They can retreat under bombardment, and they have some trouble reorganizing if they're eliminated. So it's not super punitive, but obviously it may come into play as we go. I think as the French, I'm just going to want to kind of drive in here quickly to get to Grossbeeren to try and take the town away from these defenders. Looks like we have a couple of options from these columns that are moving forward. I don't actually know what all of the units are in here. I mean, I set them up, but I can't remember at this point. But it does look like all, you know, we're going to be assaulting from the south essentially because none of the roads, the road network here is not going to be able to get above this direction unless we spend a lot of time, and I don't think we want to do that. We are going to have the rest of this corps, which is the 3rd Corps. These are Prussians, by the way, Prussian 3rd Corps, collapse into the town. Historically, they were able to drive the French away and force the French off of marching to Berlin. So we'll see if we can prevent that from happening. That's basically it. I guess we're going to get started, and you'll play along with me as we learn the Library of Napoleonic Battles. Okay, so we rolled for weather. We got fair weather on this first turn of the game. The French are the first player. They're going to go first. This may be a little bit more challenging than I had originally anticipated. So the first thing we have to do is look at Rainier's 7th Corps here. Rainier himself, he's got a 4 and he's got a 6. The 6, I believe, is his movement allowance. Yes, that's his movement. The 4 is his initiative rating. So first we check to see, if we would like, our officers to see if they can put all of their units in their formation into command within their command range. He's an officer. He's got a command range of 3. Unfortunately, not sure about this approach to the town, but that means that his range can only get to this unit here. I'm going to take this off to show you the unit. The middle number on a unit is their initiative rating. This is what they would roll against to see if they're in command or out of command. But kind of like Great Battles, or Great Campaigns of the American Civil War, we have a kind of a leader versus unit dichotomy going on here. So the first thing I'm going to do is roll for Rainier's command. I need a 4 or less. I got it, and that's going to mean that both Rainier and the units that are within range, this infantry unit, this is the 24th Infantry Brigade, yeah, something like that. They're both going to be in command. That also means that every other single unit over here is going to be out of command. I'm just going to put one down here to show them. So what does that mean for the out of command units? That means that after we do the officer command phase, we need to check and see whether or not the rest of the units, based on their individual initiative, are going to be in command. Now, what does being in command versus out of command mean? A unit in command has no restrictions on them. A unit out of command may not damage or repair certain bridges. Obviously, it's not going to be a huge issue here. And they are only allowed to move if they pass an initiative check. So what we are likely going to have happen is that some of these units are going to be able to move and some of them are not going to be able to move. And what it's going to happen is that we're going to get kind of a broken formation moving up to the town of Grossbeeren, who are then going to have to array for battle against that defending force before the rest of the Prussian coalition gets there. And as you are about to see, most of these units, well, that's a light cavalry unit. He's got 3 initiatives, so that's not too bad. But we've got a 2 initiative there. We've got a 1 initiative there. And we've got a 2 initiative there. He's also stacked with another infantry unit. So they're not the greatest units in the world, and it's likely going to be kind of a problem. Now, one of the options we do have here is we can put them in what's called road march. If they get to activate, I guess this should be facing this way. And that would allow units to sort of be in command as long as one of these guys is in command. I have to check on the rules, but I believe they're not allowed to be adjacent to each other when they're in road march. This column needs to leave a hex in between each of the different units. So I'm not quite sure I'm going to be able to do that. I'll look at the road march rules. That might be one way to get up there. Now, the downside to that, obviously, is that if they enter a zone of control, they've got to do an attack that's not very good odds. So what I really would like to do is get these guys kind of arrayed across this terrain here and sort of surrounding this village. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to roll initiative for all these units, and then we'll figure out who's moving and who isn't. All right, well, I'm getting a very good lesson in the command structure of this game. So of all of these units, the only ones in command are Rainier, this unit here behind him, this unit here, this unit here. All the rest of these units are out of command. They did not roll, they don't have high initiatives, they did not roll initiatives, they're really unsure what they're doing. So what this tells me is that in order to get this column moving, I need to get Rainier into a position where he can command all of these units. And that's looking like it's going to be, well, this is, I guess, the maneuver element of this system. I got to get him down here somewhere. We'll figure out where the best option is going to be. In the meantime, some of these guys are going to get left behind, and we're going to get sort of an advanced force kind of collected, hopefully together, in range of him, and then start to move towards the town. But as you can see, it's just a complete clusterfuck right now on the road. Well, same situation up here. This leader is Bertrand. He's got a command value of 3. I rolled a 6. That means that every single unit here is out of command, and we are not going to be approaching Blankenfeld this turn. Sad opening for the French, I'm not going to lie, but I guess it could also happen over here to the coalition allies as well. In the meantime, I'm going to take my movement and see where we end up. Okay, one correction. I made a mistake here. Not a huge deal, but I did do the rolling for the units too early. What you do, the order that this goes is you roll for the leader's command to see who he activates within his range. Then for any unit that did not use his leader's rating or is out of range of his leader's rating, then you'll move them. Then you'll check every individual unit. So functionally what this means is that obviously we know that there's a failure up here, and they're not going to be doing much. Down here, Rainier and this unit are going to move first. Then we would have checked all of this. Then we would have moved the units that got their initiative passed. So there's no actual difference here. It's just the order of things and when you do them. I wanted to point that out for anyone who's plays the system. You check your leaders, you move the units that are in command, then you check every individual unit, then you move them. All right, well, we've come to the end of turn 1, and so far it's been an absolute snarl of a traffic jam all over the map. Rainier's corps, with some sparse exceptions, obviously is all scrunched up along this road, not able to get going. He's moved down to try and fix that next turn. We had Bulow down here. He actually rolled well for his initiative. He got some units up here to Grossbeeren, thankfully, who are all in command. They're going to try and take up some defensive positions. He then moved down to try and get these guys going. They rolled on their own initiatives. They failed. This Vedette failed on his initiative. These units up here failed on their initiative. And then up here in the north, who is this? This is... I don't even know what his name is. Towen Sutsen. I could probably look in the historical notes. I'm not a big Napoleonic history person. Anyways, he rolled, unfortunately, because these guys are out of supply, his initiative rating is only a 3. He rolled a 4, so that means this entire corps is out of command. And because he was within range of everyone and failed, every single unit is not allowed to, units are not allowed to roll if their commander is in range. So he was going to try and reposition some of the defenses here, primarily to like block up this particular road leading right into the town, but he couldn't do it. I'm using red cubes for out of command. It's a lot easier than dealing with the markers, and especially because there's not enough markers for every unit. So not a lot of action in the first hour of this particular quote-unquote battle, and we'll see where it goes from here. We have just finished the movement phase, or the command movement phase on the French side of the turn on turn 2. Oh, by the way, I should mention, I'm going to be tracking victory points up here with these white cubes. Hello, cat. The coalition player received 1 point for the first turn for hanging on to both of the key towns. We're going to try and change that, and thankfully this turn I did get better rolls on my command, and so we were able to get into a more, especially up here, but more of a combat-ready position to try and assault these towns. Renier, let's see if I can focus that. Did manage to get most of his column moving. A lot of them went into road march to come down this major road. And they've set up some positions here, hopefully before the coalition can get there. So now we've got this unit getting ready to attack. In this game, you are, I believe, forced to attack any unit you are adjacent to. And so that was the goal here. This is going to be a town hex, it looks like. There's a chateau in this hex, but that's not the key hex in this scenario. So we're going to try and take that before the coalition gets moving. I should also mention down here, we also got some of the reinforcements for the third column that was coming on this southern axis. That's Oudinot with the 12th Corps and this 3rd Cavalry Corps who raced out ahead of him. So there's a long way to go to get into the fight, but... You know, if we can get Oudinot to potentially here by the night turn, we can get some victory points for that. Basically make his camp at Sputendorf. Probably not going to be able to join the battle, but we'll see how that goes. There is actually no commander for the 3rd Cavalry Corps. So these units are moving by their own initiative if they get to move at all. I believe that is the correct situation. I'll double check that. And yeah, and so I want to take you through the combat procedure here, just so that I can do it once. As I walk through it, it will really help me to understand the combat. I'm going to bring the rule book over here, and we'll see what the first step is. So obviously, we're going to have one combat here with this stack to this stack, and I think the odds are pretty good for me. First thing we do, line of sight. Are units adjacent to each other? Yes, we remove the hidden markers to reveal what lies beneath. We have got the this infantry, looks like a brigade. All right. We have an infantry brigade here defending the town of Grossbeeren. This is sort of the coalition defensive position. These two obviously can see each other. We've got a double stacked unit here of light cavalry and DeVoe's infantry brigade as well. So we're at 2-to-1 odds, which is pretty nice. So that's the line of sight step. Then there's the cavalry retreat step, where cavalry units may retreat before combat. Unless they are facing off against cavalry with higher movement. Well, in this case, we brought the cavalry in. We do not want to retreat them. We're going to make this assault. Then there's an artillery reaction fire step. If there was artillery involved in the combat, they could bombard the attackers. In this case, there is not any. Oh, and incidentally, by the way, when we did the line of sight step, this unit and this unit cannot see each other because there is a hex side between them where there are units occupying. So that is blocked view. There's a hill here that these units are on other sides of, so they can't see each other. So it's usually 3 hexes. So it's really just these 2 units, nice and simple. There's no artillery, there's no bombardment that I'm going to be doing with any artillery units within range, and so we're just going to skip all of that and move right into the cavalry charge step, of which I don't have a cavalry unit that is not adjacent, so there's going to be no cavalry charge, and you can't charge into towns anyways. And then we go to the combat phase. So let's move to that. And make sure I do that properly. This game system is a little procedural. It's a little heavier than people online are making it out to be. Yep, all engaged units must attack. It's a single hex-to-hex combat. Let's look at the effects of the on combat of the town. Town hex, defending infantry are going to be times 50%. So, yeah. So this is going to be, what, times 50% is going to be 4.5, and we've got 6. So when we look at the combat table, is there a 1.5 to 1? There is a 1.5 to 1 chart, and then I believe we're just going to roll on it. I don't believe there are any die roll modifiers. Yeah, I don't think so. There's just the terrain of that town. So, okay, 1.5 to 1 for my attacking French force. We rolled a 6. Is that good or bad? Is this one of those systems? That is a very bad result. That's bad. That is an AR star, and what that means is that the attacker has to probably retreat. Okay, so it's normally would be an attacker retreat. However, we are attacking into a town, so this becomes a shock result. So here's what happens with a shock result. We compare the initiative rating of our lead units. In this case, let's make, it doesn't matter for me, but let's make this infantry unit my lead unit, and this is going to be their lead unit. We compare the initiative ratings on both sides. The initiative is 3 to 2. And then we look at the shock table. And the modified initiative. Oh yeah, each player has to roll a die now. So the French and coalition player each going to roll a die. And that might modify their, we're essentially hand-to-hand melee. That might modify their initiative value. So let's see what we get. They both rolled really high, so they both added 2 to their initiative. So it's actually 5 to 4. And so the attacker's modified initiative is 5, the defender's is 4, and that in that shock combat we get a DR. So it's like a second table you go to. Now, I believe they're allowed to ignore the retreat if they're in a town. Defenders retreat. Looks like they have to retreat out of the town. Yep. So they're gonna have to retreat 1 hex, and they're just gonna move back here because there's no reason. Now I need to look up the advance after combat and control, or advance after combat rules and retreat rules to make sure I'm doing it properly. 1 second. Okay, so the ruling is that all 1 attacking infantry unit and all cavalry with them, which in this case was both of these guys, are allowed to advance into the hex. I am going to take control as the French of Grossbeeren here on turn 2. We're just going to pop right in there. Yeah, that sounds great. I'm not too worried about them being out of command next turn because I don't plan to make them go anywhere. They've got a pretty good combat strength in that town. They're just going to want to hold that. Now, we don't hide the units again because they're still out of line of sight to each other. So these are going to stay revealed. So we're going to be able to see what's going on in this particular area of the map as we continue. I will show you real quickly sort of what the combat table looks like so you can get a sense of what I was looking at. So here is the combat results table. So we were on 1.5 to 1. Of course, I rolled a 6, which is an AR star. Because he was in a town, it translated to a shock result. We go to the shock combat table. We roll a d6. We roll a d6 based on what we roll. We add to the initiative of our unit. We got +2 on both of them. That made it a 5 to a 4. That caused a DR. And the unit retreated, and we have taken control of Grossbeeren here on turn 1 with Regnier's Corps, which is great. We're going to see what the response from the coalition is going to be. But we still have another combat to do up here. I'm going to run that off camera because I have belabored this point long enough, and then I'll come back with the results of that as we move into the coalition turn. The battle up in the north with Bertrand's 4th Corps actually went really well. He has the Italians with him here, and they actually did quite well for themselves, despite some bad die rolling. So this stack here, they assaulted over this crest against that 4th Corps infantry brigade. They succeeded in shot combat, hand-to-hand combat, driving them off back towards the west. They were able to take that town on that side of the crest. That did reveal this other infantry brigade up here. It's a pretty weak one, but all told now we've got a sort of 1v1 situation with these two, and they're going to be engaged for as long as they are there together. Basically, once you're engaged with an enemy adjacent to them, it's pretty hard to get out of that unless you make them retreat. You're kind of committed to combat, which is an interesting part of this system. We also revealed some more hidden units here after Martel and Moroni made an assault into this clear hex in the outskirts of Blankenfeld under Bertrand's command, direct command. They managed to drive off, let's see, they drove off this guy whose name I can't pronounce, Tauentotson, and Lindenau's brigade. From this, made him retreat twice, actually, right through the city center. So now the center of Blankenfeld is wide open to try and get in there. And we'll see if we can move a unit in. We've got an artillery piece here still under Bertrand. And there's this unit here, another artillery piece. We're going to try and get into bombardment range. If we can lay down some artillery fire around the town, we can potentially keep the 4th Corps at bay. And remember, they're out of supply, so they suffer some ill effects. I should probably double check that to make sure I did the combat right. But all in all, the French having a good turn. They secured one of their objectives and cleared the way to secure the other. And so now we're going to flip over to the coalition turn, and we'll see what they can do in response. Well, if you're the coalition allies, you never want to see that. The dreaded double sixes. I rolled for both commanders for command this turn, and obviously that's a fail and a fail up there. So the coalition in a really bad way, all of a sudden, with getting their units into position. The command structure is broken down, and I don't know quite what the response is going to be able to be, given that most of their units have really bad initiative ratings. I got to go through and roll for all of these guys to see what they can do, and then up here as well. It's not as bad up here because we still have some adjacent units, so we're going to be able to attack even if they're out of command, but obviously not ideal for maneuver. Well, the 4th Corps and its Italian units having a grand old time. They managed to repulse the sort of engaged battle that was going on. Both of these units had to attack here. They were repulsed 2 hexes. They had to retreat away. The sort of pincer attack against this unit also failed. The coalition not rolling really well at all, and that forced another 2-hex retreat for those units. So that's why this brigade has retreated basically through the leader hex here. I think you're allowed to retreat through units. I will double check that. This unit had to retreat out here. And then interestingly about this system, when you successfully, even on the defense, force a retreat, you are allowed to advance. So we did move St. Andrea's brigade right here to put the pressure on and to sort of secure our route into the city center on hopefully the next turn, and get the points for it. But right now, still under the control nominally of the Prussians and the coalition. But all in all, a good turn. The French, I think, made good progress towards their objectives despite some of the command snafus. And obviously the coalition, the Prussians, don't want to see this happen again. All these red cubes are out of command units. That was a terrible, terrible turn for them. That was the 1 p.m. turn. So we're going into the 2 p.m. turn. We're going to get a bunch of reinforcements for the French, even more. And then that will be the last turn of fair weather, and then we'll check the weather again. So all according to plan if you're a fan of the French. Well, just an absolutely brutal turn at 2 p.m. for the French. The command structure breaking down a little bit. All of their leaders in sort of hot zones failed on their command rolls. And I'm learning the value in this system of having an overall commander who's able to freely turn officers into command if they're within range. The fact that this scenario doesn't have one is making it very difficult to maneuver these corps to do what I want them to do. We did get some more reinforcements down here. We had the rest of the 12th Corps enter here. And then last time I mentioned that there was no leader for the 3rd Cavalry Corps. That's because he was coming on later. These were sort of his advanced scouts. So he came on and came down this way. And basically, we might bring him to Arnsdorf. Or more likely, because he's got more movement points, we might try and get him to Sputendorf. And we might try and get Udenau to Arnsdorf since it's a closer march. We'll see what happens on the next turn. But essentially, all these units were able to move. They were in command this turn. Here, so we are engaged here, but we are not forced to make an attack because we are in a town hex, and that is true of this Prussian unit here as well. We can kind of stand off against each other. We are going to have our first bombardment, however, and that is here. We've got a couple of artillery units who did manage to move up this turn. They were one of the few units Renier's corps' command that we're able to move in. We've got the Roth first and the Gau first, and that is 4-point artillery barrage. Now we will be barraging into a. Oh, you know what? I actually may not be able to barrage in there. I didn't realize that was a slope hex downhill. I can't actually see that particular unit down there in that town from the top of this hill. So never you mind. We're just gonna. I pulled the hidden unit thing off because I thought they were spotted, but they are not. They are still hidden. So never mind. No bombardment happening there. I might consider attacking here though. It's a 2-to-1 attack. It's a 2-to-1 attack, and securing this town with the chateau might be huge, although it's going to be difficult to crack that. That chateau is going to provide double strength to the defender. So that would just be a straight 1-to-1. How is the odds on a 1-to-1 attack there? It's actually fairly good. If I rolled a 6, which I've been rolling a lot of again, that would be bad. But I may chance it just because gaining control of this hex would be pretty big. Although, you know, with the coalition moving up, do I want that, or do I want to get some support in before I decide to make that attack? I'm not forced to attack. My worry is if I don't do that, and they get in command on this turn, and they're able to reinforce this hex, then suddenly there's a 1-to-1 attack against me here, and that's going to be a lot easier for them to dislodge me. So I think I am going to make that attack. Let's see what happens. It's a 1-to-1 because it's 6-to-6. He's doubled in that terrain. And we're going to do it. Is there any other terrain considerations that I need to be aware of? No. It is just he's in a chateau, and that is why it is like that. Yeah. All right, let's do it. 1-to-1 attack. I'm making the call now. I need to improve my position. I rolled a 3. That's pretty good. That is going to be a DR star, which I think turns it into a shock combat. Yes, correct. That is a shock combat. So we look at the initiatives of the units. Obviously, I've got a 3. They've got a 2. We roll up the initiative modifier. Let's see what we get there. Ooh, it's pretty good for the defenders. That's going to be +2 for the defender, so they're going to be at 4. So it's actually 3-to-4. We come over here and look. The attacker's a 3 to a 4. It's actually an attacker retreat, which is not great. I will not lie. That is not a great result. I guess I should have declared which of these was my lead unit. We'll say it was. We'll say it was this. So that was unfortunate. That could have gone better. And these guys are out of command. So, well, that's what the cube is for. I took a risk. I took a gamble on that one. It did not pay off. I thought maybe I could secure my position a little bit better, but that I guess will teach me to assault the walls of a fortified position. All right, we're going to switch over to the coalition and see what they can do with this sudden opening that they find themselves with. Well, the Prussians caught a break this turn. They managed to get all of their leaders in command. They're going to be launching a huge attack here against St. Andrea's brigade, who found itself cut off. They've actually got combined arms under this leader here. They've got cavalry, artillery, and infantry, so that's going to be a column shift for them. That's going to be pretty huge. And then they've also got sort of supporting attacks here from the north. That may be all they need to displace this unit, and potentially it's going to have to retreat through a Zoc, which means it's going to get moved to the eliminated box, at least eliminated from the map for a little while, not dead. And then we've got this attack here, so we've got 9 combat strength going against 8 combat strength in clear terrain. So we'll see if we can get lucky and force these guys to retreat and secure Blankenfeld. I think if we're able to push these units back, it's going to be tough for this corps to continue moving in. Now, the one thing to remember is that if we get any sort of shock results, all of these initiative numbers are 1 less because these guys are demoralized. So we'll see what happens. I don't believe they're allowed to advance after combat either. I think they just want to cause some damage because they're demoralized. Down here, Bulow activated. He got some of these units moving up, trying to defend kind of this open area around the town of Grossbeeren. This cavalry unit took initiative. It was outside of his range, but it did manage to activate, and it managed to sneak up here and take control of the town back, although now it's got to attack Devoe's, yeah, it's got to attack at a 1 to 1.5 odds attack. We'll see. It's not, the combat table is actually not that bad as the attacker, even at low odds, so we'll see what happens there. I believe, I don't believe that any of these artillery units, are these any artillery units? No. Okay, so there's no bombardment happening here. Yeah, so we'll have a couple of combats. We'll see what happens with the coalition. Actually, I misspoke. This cavalry unit doesn't have to attack because it's occupying a town hex. So it can just sit there and defend this town and keep control of the city. And at the end of this turn, there'll be another point for the coalition player for having control of that key location. So ultimately, this attack that I did to try and improve my position here backfired pretty badly for the French, and maybe I should not have done that. I was just concerned that I was going to get surrounded, but you know, that's kind of the fog of war here that we're talking about. Oh, speaking of backfire. Oh my God, terrible result. They got, the Prussians got super unlucky. They just rolled really badly. The 1-to-1 attack maybe was not the best idea, but they were trying to isolate some units. But man, that got repulsed. So as you can see from this hex, I believe he was here and he was being attacked from, I forget exactly. I can go back and look at the video. But essentially what happened was repulsed all the attackers. And then because they retreated, he was able to move in and take control of the town. With the advance after combat. St. Andrea's brigade, same situation. He repulsed the attack he was being attacked from here, and I believe from here. It was like this. He was being attacked from here and here, or here and here, and he repulsed the attack. The coalition, the Prussians rolled a 6, which is terrible, and because they had to vacate the hex, he was able to move in and advance, and now the Italians here, the French army, has control of Blankenfeld pretty securely. They're not forced to attack out of these town hexes. They provide some defense, and perhaps some luck swinging their way. Now it's going to be a matter of bringing up these forces from the rear, this artillery units and specifically, and getting into a position where we can secure Blankenfeld against any further counterattacks. So hopefully we can get Bertrand to make his command roll next turn. But yeah, not so good. Well, we just rolled weather at the beginning of the 3 p.m. turn, and apparently a dust storm has kicked up. I don't know if that dust is getting into Rainier's eyes or what's going on here, but he is the only French commander, probably the most important one, who was not in command again this turn, which is so frustrating. So frustrating. And that means that I'm going to have to make an attack here with these guys against this cavalry unit. I'm probably unsupported because I'm likely not going to be able to get units in there. Now, these two, I didn't put a cube on them, but these two are going to have to check to see if they're in command because they're outside of Rainier's range. But basically, everyone in here is out of command. We're going to check on this unit up here as well, who's been chilling out outside of Genshagen. But everyone else is in command, so let's get to it. Very curious about the history behind the dust storm weather, but that is what we got. It's a real shame the dust storm blocks line of sight and doesn't allow for bombardment, because there is a lot of artillery in here that could absolutely decimate these positions right now, and unfortunately I'm not able to do it because of the weather. But I do think I am going to make this attack here. It's a 4-to-1 attack against that brigade, and that can do some serious damage, or at least do some serious retreating. You know, if I roll a 1, that's a DE, he's just straight out eliminated, but retreating 4, retreating 3, like I can really push him back and set up a nice position around the town, or at least prevent future counterattacks. So I think I'm going to do that. Well, we did manage to push out Oppen's cavalry here out of the town. Thankfully, they didn't get the benefit of the town's defenses because they're cavalry, so they weren't modified. 1-to-1 attack, I rolled a 2. That was a defender retreat. That allowed, again, my infantry, this was a Devoe, and Goblins, his light cavalry, to move into the town and take control after that combat, which is huge because now this is going to be the first turn where the French have control of both objective hexes, both Blankenfeld and Grossbeeren. So that's going to be 2 points, a net swing of 1 in their favor at the end of the turn, assuming that the Prussians can't take it back. But I think last time they attacked, I forgot to double, or at least times 1.5 the infantry there. So I will not forget to do that again. So Bülow managed to get his corps together and launch a pretty strong counterattack against the French forces. These infantry brigades and this horse artillery regiment stormed up this hill. They drove the French from the heights there now, and they didn't advance, so they're going to force the French, if they want to take out this line, they're going to force them to attack up a hill, which is not going to be good. Bülow himself and this cavalry brigade over here, who was driven from Grossbeeren on the French turn, decided that they were going to counterattack, and they counterattacked at 2-1. It was a pretty good shot. Unfortunately, they rolled very badly again, and that forced a shock combat. The shock combat actually was an exchange, so we have our first step losses of the game. We took it on the French light cavalry. No retreat, so thankfully the French are going to retain control, so it was a pretty bloody urban battle here. But unfortunately for Bülow, he's got to take it from his strongest unit, and that means Kraft's infantry brigade here, which is a 7 strength point unit. Once I reduce it, that becomes a 5 strength point unit. Still pretty good, but obviously not the kind of losses that he wants to be taking. And so now we're engaged there. We're engaged there, but unfortunately, the reason Bülow decided to attack from the chateau is because this cavalry unit was going to have to attack. Unfortunately, the cavalry unit was not in range during the command segment and then failed his initiative roll, so he would have had to attack at like 1-2 or even 1-3, something like that. So Bülow decided he was going to help him out and support him. Unfortunately, we got an exchange, so we have our first losses of the battle. Those will be victory points at the end of the game, probably. And we are done with the 3 p.m. turn. We are on now. These guys are out of command. We are now on to the 4 p.m. turn on the French side of things in this dust storm. A pretty vicious counterattack from Bülow's forces punched the French out of Grossbeeren here on the coalition side of the turn, especially when they've got these 9 strength brigades coming down, bearing down on the French. It was pretty nasty, and they actually eliminated a French unit. They eliminated Van Riesel's brigade. He's not permanently eliminated. He can potentially be recovered, but they forced a retreat of a long way. You can see that this reduced cavalry unit had to go back pretty far, and Devaux's brigade had to retreat. So a pretty good counter-punch there from the Prussians, and they have regained control of Grossbeeren this turn. They're keeping the game really tight, which is interesting. Up here, we had a similar situation. The Prussians up here did counterattack. They successfully managed to take sort of the second hex of this town, but the French still control Blankenfeld, sort of the city center, and the retreat was a unit that could stack here. So now it's a pretty formidable force under Bertrand, and I suspect that if he's able to get command next turn, we'll see some of these units move up and potentially try and push the Prussians back. It's been kind of back and forth, you know, and this is kind of emblematic of the CRT. I know a lot of people don't like the push-pull CRT, but it is pretty interesting. I mean, we're talking a matter of hours here, so like the number of casualties would probably not be appreciable enough to degrade units really far. That's why it's not so bloody. But even then, you know, we did get an eliminated unit over there, and you know, when things go bad, they can go bad. So I'm not sure I have a problem with it. It makes it for an interesting strategic situation as you try to regroup for a counterattack, which does feel pretty Napoleonic to me. Anyways, we're heading into the 5 p.m. turn, and then after that, we will roll for new weather. Well, some brutal fighting this hour in the late afternoon around Grossbeeren. We got step losses on both sides. Essentially, in even draws, both of these combats went into close melee, and there's just a lot of dead French and a lot of dead Prussians lying between these two hexes as the French try and force the issue at Grossbeeren to try and take control of it. They did reduce that 9 strength infantry brigade down to 6, which is a loss of 3 strength points, but they also reduced one of their 5s down to 3. It's only 2 strength points. That's a trade that the French were willing to take. But the French did retreat this. They did retreat. If I can get this to focus, come on. Gablence's light cavalry before the combat. He backed out into this marsh hex here. And he's just hanging around, just waiting until there's an opportunity to throw his strength points in against those units. Attackers are allowed to retreat before combat if they have only cavalry in a hex, which is pretty nice. So I can keep this flank kind of threatened. And then I did the same thing down here. Actually, finally the second Cavalry Corps, they're really speedy. So the sort of advanced vanguard of, who's the leader down here? Arrighi. I believe Origi is down here near Sputendorf. They raced up these roads and this clear terrain, and they are now in a situation where they could potentially outflank Bülow's corps here. So he's got to be really careful. He's probably going to want to use this this hilltop as defense against them. They're not super powerful, but they can definitely get around behind. If the French can launch an attack here, then it could be problematic. So we'll see what happens. There might be a little bit of maneuvering, assuming Bülow is in command this turn. Well, as we begin the 6 p.m. turn, after the French have been pushed back by Bülow's corps, I've run into a rule situation that I am not sure how to parse. So we rolled for weather. We got mud. And I'm looking into the movement point cost column here. Obviously in mud, you know, you've got a reduction in artillery power, -2 DRM when you're bombarding, which is really unfortunate because the French have a lot of cannons in range of the enemy. There's also no cavalry charges allowed, which again, unfortunate for the French. And then I get to movement point cost here in mud, and I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at here. So -1, and then also ×2 for baggage trains and artillery units. That one it makes more sense. We're in mud, they're wheeled vehicles. It's gonna be more expensive for them to move. But -1 seems to indicate that every other type of unit, it's easier to move in mud, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And then I look at some of these other weather things, thunderstorms, fog. It also says -1, and in fog specifically, it says -1 all units. I don't believe that mud, thunderstorms, or fog would make it easier for units to move, because this seems to be saying -1 movement point costs, which would apply to the terrain of the map, which can't possibly be what this is referring to. What I can only assume this means is that it's -1 movement allowance for units. So it's double movement cost for trains and artillery, and that it is -1 movement point value on counters. It's the only thing that makes sense to me given the theme and the weather here. If I'm wrong, please let me know. But I'm going to play with all units having -1 movement point this turn, and obviously supply trains and artillery doubling their movement costs. So yeah, that's how I'm parsing that. All right, we've come to the final coalition turn where the Prussians are going to get to activate before we enter the 9 p.m. night turn, which is a special kind of turn, and I'll take you through that in a minute. But I did want to go over the situation and see sort of basically how the game's going to end. Up here, the Prussians, the demoralized Prussians of the 4th Corps have been driven away from Blankenfeld. They're going to make one final attack here to see if they can push the units out of there. Probably not going to happen. Yeah, so the French have secured their objective here. Down here, we've had kind of a shifting sort of battle going back and forth for the last couple of hours. Bülow did manage to recapture the town. He managed to repel several attacks by Renier. But coming up from the south has been Origi's 2nd Cavalry, who have been really good units, and they've actually stormed up these roads and kind of had to force the Prussians into stretching out this flank here, lest they be surrounded in Grossbeeren. Yeah, so that's Origi's 3rd Cavalry, and then we've also got Oudinot's 12th Corps coming up, but unfortunately they did not arrive in time. And if he had gotten one more command activation, he could have actually moved in here and maybe attacked. But I think what I should have done was left him at Sputendorf to get the points during the night turn. We did get Origi here all the way to Rulsdorf, which is pretty impressive for his cavalry, and we're going to see. Basically, there's not going to be any combat here. The Prussians are just happy to hold it. But up here, we'll have one final attack. Then we'll go through the night turn. I'll kind of explain that. And then we'll tot up the victory points and see where we are. Only one unit eliminated in this battle. And that is this Van Rysel infantry unit. He was not able to be recovered in the 6 p.m. turn, unfortunately. He's got a very low rating there in the middle. So that will count against the French, I believe, at the end of the game in terms of losses. There are also a couple of reduced units in here. We'll see how it goes. Well, the Prussians up here in the north, out of supply, managed to scrape together one final offensive attack here. We had to make some really poor odds attacks off to the side to soak off those units. So you can see these units here had to retreat from there. This unit here, I believe, had to retreat from, or there was an inconclusive attack here. But ultimately, what ended up happening here with these two infantry, they managed to drive Bertrand out of Blankenfeld. Unfortunately, they're demoralized. They're not allowed to advance after combat, so the town is going to stay under French control. And so the final maneuver of the day is a victory of sorts, but not quite enough to dislodge the French from their objective there. We're going to go to the night turn, and before I do that, let's just show you the points spread of control of at the end of the game for the towns over the course. So here's the turn track. Blue cubes are turns that the French had control of one of the towns. White cubes are turns that the coalition had control of one of the towns. Obviously, at the end of the game, each side's going to get 5 points for controlling their side, so each side's going to get 5. That kind of cancels. But you can see perfectly even right down the line. The coalition had control the first turn. The French managed to take Blankenfeld really early. They had one turn where they also managed to grab Grossbeeren, but they could never quite penetrate into the defenses here to take it away from Bülow's corps, which, according to the historical notes, is actually pretty accurate. So let's do the night turn now, and then we'll look at the board final positions, and I'll give you my thoughts on the system. Well, okay, I have done the night turn. It's actually pretty simple. There's not a lot going on. You can disengage from any combats you might be forced into be making. So, for example, here, you know, these Prussian infantry units could disengage. They have the option. They're not going to. Could disengage here with the French. You know, they might consider that. They might go back here, for example, just to give them some operating room on the next turn. There's no other engagements happening here. Obviously, Rainier does not want to disengage from the town. He would be trying to capture that if this battle is going to continue. And up here, it does not look like he wants to disengage from this unit here because he's hoping that they can make an attack. If these guys are out of command on the French turn, these guys could move in, make an attack, and potentially take the town back. But as it is, this is where we kind of end. There's a recovery phase where units awaiting recovery. So we had a unit awaiting recovery that then went into the recovered box. Ultimately, it turns out that this unit with 3 strength points is not going to make a difference. Up to 4 strength points of difference between eliminated units is no victory points awarded. And then after that, there's a night march phase, which we don't have in this scenario. So that's the 9 p.m. turn. Now, I looked in the rules. The points you would score for leaders in towns would be in the night a.m. turn. And there is a turn track for the next day if you're going to do the 2-day battle here, which I did not do. I think the only way you can get the 2-day battle is if you're using the cards, or you just decide going into it you're going to do the 2-day battle, I guess. I did not choose to do that. I just choose to do a 1-day battle. And so because of that, I don't believe I get to score the points. So each leader in a town is worth half a point. So we've got Arrighi down here in Rulsdorf. We actually still have Bertrand up there, who, even though he's not in the city center, he is in a town hex. So that'd be another half point. That would give the French 1 additional point because the only leader that the coalition has in a town is here with Bülow, and that's half, and you round fractions down. So all told, you know, we had basically I think it was 14 points per side. Plus, if the French got their 1 VP here for the leaders in the town, they would have won the battle by 1 point. So technically, by the wording of the rules, it is a draw. But the French, I think there's an argument to be made that the French made enough progress here with their corps. I mean, you know, if Arrighi goes again, or if Oudinot gets to activate here, the Prussians are going to have to withdraw, otherwise they're going to risk being surrounded. So we'll call it a French victory with an asterisk. In this learning game, I probably made some mistakes as well. But overall, let's talk about how I feel about it. So I think it's a really interesting system. Once you kind of get the handle on the turn sequence, which my first complaint about the game, let's start there, is that there is no turn sequence player aid. You've got all these player aids in the game. You've got the morale tracker, you've got the recovery box, you've got the weather chart, you've got the turn track, you've got the combat tables, you've got the charts and tables. So you've got the terrain effects chart for combat, you've got the terrain effects chart for movement, you've got all of the different random parts of the game on their own table, stacking limits, recon, road march, all of that stuff. But there's no actual sequence of play. You've got the combat tables again. This would have been a perfect spot for that, by the way, the sequence of play. I mean, you start to get it down. It's not too complicated. It moves pretty quickly, but I had to keep referring to the rules to flip back to that to see what goes when and so forth. There's a bunch of different command phases where certain things can happen. I like the feel of it. You know, the push-pull CRT didn't really bother me too much. I feel like it actually captured the era, I mean, pretty nicely. You know, we didn't get many eliminated results, but when we did, like here, when we got step losses here, it actually felt like a really impactful like event on the battle. You know, there was like a burst of intense combat that caused casualties. But, you know, at the brigade level, you know, formations sort of retreating and then coming back in, and sort of the ebb and flow, the back and forth, felt kind of like a Napoleonic battle with its, like, you know, the maneuver element to it. And so from that perspective, I liked it. It can be a little frustrating when you don't have overall commanders in the game. And by the way, overall commanders would look something like this. So, you know, here's Napoleon. He's got the ability to issue up to three commands to make 3 of his core commanders in command by default with not having to roll for it. So there was a lot of disorganization happening in this battle with core commanders not being able to activate their units. And so there was kind of there wasn't really a momentum or a flow to a lot of it. But, you know, in general, it kind of accomplished what it set out to do. And, you know, like I said, I really like the production values. I really like the way it feels. I love how, you know, as the battle developed, as this column came up and marched, and then we had this other column come up this way. Initially, it was just kind of like contained to Grossbeeren and sort of its surroundings. And then, you know, the 3rd Cavalry Corps rolls in, and suddenly the Prussians have to, you know, rejigger their line so they don't get surrounded. And so, like, seeing that develop on the map is a really cool thing. And the turns are short enough that you can play, you know, you can play a smaller scenario of this in, you know, not very long at all, once you get the rules down. Yeah, I think it's really neat. That is my first impression. I think as a starting scenario, maybe this is probably not the best one, but I'm actually gonna set up the second battle, which is Kotzbach, from this box. It's a much bigger scenario, a lot more units, and there are also commanders in that one. So I'm hoping to see some more maneuver elements in that one. It is also a fairly short battle in terms of number of turns. So we're going to get that set up. We're going to do that in another video. But I really hope you enjoyed this look at the Library of Napoleonic Battles, starting with the Battle of Grossbeeren from 4 Lost Battles. I think it's a system, you know, I was a little skeptical about whether or not I would enjoy this based on what I've read about it, and you know, there's many alternate rule systems for these games, and that's usually a sign that there's some elements that aren't quite tuned and whatnot. But I actually really enjoyed this. I thought it was super neat, and I can definitely see myself as someone who's not even really knowledgeable about Napoleonic history, and not like overly interested in it from a general perspective. I could definitely see myself playing this system quite a bit. It is the perfect game for a solo player as well. And, you know, I think the hidden units actually helped a lot. It helped me make decisions that weren't perfectly optimal. And in a solo gaming experience, that's actually great, because I want some emergent gameplay. I want there to be mistakes. I want there to be some stuff that I was not predicting to have happen. And so I actually liked playing with the solo units the hidden units in solo. And yeah, overall general positive impressions. We're going to do another one. I might come back with some more detailed thoughts after that, but I hope you enjoyed what you see here. And if you're interested in checking out the Library of Napoleonic Battles, be sure to check out Operational Studies Group website, where they've got a lot of resources on this system and the games in general.